Hey, my wonderful, wonderful, lovely people. A pleasant afternoon to you. So, I was in conversation with somebody who really was not pleased by something that had happened to them. Let's use switch between the plural and the singular. And the individual was sharing with me about, there was some kind of policy out that would allow, and it is in relation to traveling mileage per diem, those things. And usually mileage is when you drive personally your motor vehicle. As a traveling officer, for example, when you come back, you can claim for the mileage, because based on the fuel, based on the wear and the tear of your vehicle, so to speak. So you're paid for that, based on the fact that you drove your personal vehicle. But the individual sharing that said that there was some policy that came out or document that came out that would allow any traveling officer. So even if you were carpooling and you traveled with somebody, you could claim. So they had cut out the passenger mileage. So the original driver would have been paid passenger mileage if they had carried a passenger. But I guess they try to make people across the board benefit because, I mean, it's still very tiresome to be, even if you're not driving, you have to drive with somebody, it's tiresome. Plus, you're actually going out to do duty, you're doing work. So I guess maybe it was reason from that perspective. I'm just surmising. So the under certain usual policies, you're not paid mileage if you're not the driver. You'll pay other allowances, travel related allowances, depending on the policy. But remember, I said that the policy had stipulated that, whether you drive or not, if once you go on the work and you're operating as a traveling officer, you're paid. Nevertheless, what they had said, what they have a problem with is that apparently the policy was changed, but the people were not notified at all. They didn't even know. They had the last document they got was what they would have. So they would have put in a claim, for their mileage and whatever. A little over 2 weeks, they were then notified that they cannot be paid because the policy has changed. So I had to go online to look at the ethics behind it, how ethical, or it just sounded very unethical, oppressive and unjust, and when I put it in the system, it says you're right to question that what you're describing raises serious fairness and governance concerns. Even if the employer technically has the authority to change a policy, we're going to separate what's legal and what is fair and what is ethical. So you have policy changes versus notification. So it says employers can usually change travel or mileage policies. However, a key principle in HR and administrative practice is policy changes should not be applied retroactively without notice. So in other words, if the people would put in the claim for their mileage and whatever it is, you don't wait 2 weeks later before you tell them they can't be paid for it, which is closer to their payday than not. That is, I mean, extremely oppressive, unjust, and unethical. The officer, in the particular case, it says the officer acted based on the existing known policy. So the officer has whatever was given to him or her. And the work was already completed. The claim was submitted in good faith. The change was only communicated after the fact. So that leans towards unfair treatment. I'm reading it on the thing here, Potential breach of legitimate expectation. A common concept in employment and administrative law. You hear what it says? A common concept in employment and administrative law. Potential breach of legitimate expectation. Why this is problematic? What makes this situation especially troubling? One, lack of transparency. Officers weren't informed beforehand. You don't make them do it and then 2.5 weeks or 2 weeks later, you tell them such and such. Retroactive application. Rules changed after the work was done. You don't do that. Financial prejudice. The officer now bears a cost or loss unexpectedly. Sometimes people plan around it, which happened in the person's case. They planned around it and then you're told you're not getting it. Delayed communication. Waiting until near payday makes it worse. It's bad. even if mileage is technically tied to you literally driving, the real issue isn't the rule. We don't live in a world where the things are written in blood, people. In our writing in blood. We make it sound like as humans you can't, and it is not being you're being unlawful or unethical. That is the other way is being unethical. You know, it's the timing and the communication. Remember, there are nuances to policies and laws, you know. There are certain nuances because we're dealing with malleable people. Human beings, we change. That is why you'll find laws, rules, regulations change. You know, it's like we're fluid. You see the different changes happening. Ethical perspective. From an ethics standpoint, this can reasonably be seen as unjust because expectations were changed after reliance. And then the poor people who are given the duty to just relay the information just has to relay the information. And it's so sad. Oppressive in effect. Because staff had no opportunity to adjust their behavior. They didn't know. They could have then said, okay, had I known this, then I would have driven. And sometimes people may work out a situation. They say, all right, this time I drive, next time you do it. And maybe something is wrong with the vehicle. So let's say, let me get this sorted out so that the next time when I drive, you can come with me. Whatever it may be. So they may have kind of have a little synergy and try to work out that. You know? So, and poor management practice. I'm reading it literally verbatim. Undermines trust and morale. That is why morale in many organizations are low. These are the little things that happen, and it's in disregard of the employee because you're not in management or you don't run things. Whatever me say go, me no business if me change something close to your pay there, so you not get the money where you claim for. And sometimes a decent amount, and you plan to do this and plan to do that, and they take that from you. That's horrible. It's almost like when the saying goes, your box bread out of somebody's mouth. That's the best way to put it. That's one of the worst things you can ever do to somebody. A fair employer would typically honor claims. Listen, a fair employer would typically honor claims already incurred under the old policy and apply the new rule going forward only. And even if the rule was changed 40, 17 years ago, if they were not notified and you didn't get any confirmation that they were notified, since they didn't know and the claim had gone in weeks in advance, then just honor the claim. It would have been better than maybe they work out something to say, all right, you know, the entity has to be paid back. We're going to make this go through. How can you pay us back? Let us work something out. If that is the case, and if push comes to shove, you know, or let them, or take it in the form of labor, let them do something in the form of service and labor to pay back. So many different ways, but you don't box the bread out of their mouth like that. As them have the bread right here, so the bread are about to hit the mouth, you know, because it's close to payday, about to go. Boop! And hungry did I kill them, hungry did I bite them. I have a major problem with that when it was shared with me. When it was shared to me, you know, with me. Yeah. And so on. Yeah. It's really, really sad. It's very, very, very sad. That's it, you know. And, you know, it says a very reasonable position to present is even if the policy has changed, it should not be applied to travel that occurred before staff were notified. The claim was made based on the rules in effect at the time, what they would have known, because there is no way they would have known otherwise and do otherwise. People might foolish, but not so foolish. People might stupid, but they're not morons, they're not incomposed, and them are no baboon to that extent. And when it was shared with me, I said, this is so unjust. I know, if you know me, I'm basically an advocate for justice and fairness. I hate, I detest, I abhor, I loathe injustice. Cheese and peas, you wouldn't understand how much I'm irked and incensed and angered by injustice. I detest it. I abhor it. I loathe it. Literally. Because I know the ramifications of injustices. I know the ramifications of unfairness. And it's a sad, sad situation. You know? And when people's hands are tied behind them and they can't do anything, it breaks morale. It lowers morale and trust in employers. It is what it is, though. So it is. Anyway, guys, you know what to do with TikTok and YouTube. Subscribe. Give me one of those lions and you can follow me on Instagram.